Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something that, let's be honest, can feel super complicated, life insurance. But we're going to break it all down by looking at a real-world example, so you can see exactly how this stuff works. Let's get into it. All right, so first up, let's meet the star of our show today. This is Daniel. He's 31, he's newly married, and he's got two kids, 8 and 10. He's at that point in his life where suddenly thinking about the future isn't just a someday thing. It's a right now thing. And really, his goal is super simple, but it's also incredibly important. He just wants to protect his family's income. That's it. He needs to know that if, God forbid, something were to happen to him, his wife and kids would be okay financially. That one simple thought is what's kicking this whole thing off.
Okay, so let's start with option one. This is what we'll call his core protection. This is really the foundation of everything, and it starts with something called term life insurance.
So what is term life insurance anyway? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like this. It's pure, no-frills protection for a set amount of time. A term, right? Usually that's something like 20 or 30 years. If you pass away during that term, your family gets a check. Simple as that. It's designed specifically for that window of time when you need it most. Like when your kids are growing up and really depending on you.
And here's where the rubber meets the road. Check out these numbers for Daniel. If he goes for $100,000 in coverage for 20 years, he's looking at just over $23 a month. Not bad, right? But if he wants to triple that protection to $300,000, the price jumps to about $58. And you can see, stretching that term out to 30 years also bumps up the price. It's really just a balancing act, isn't it? More coverage, longer term, higher monthly cost.
All right, so that's the basic foundation. But on top of that, Daniel can start adding some layers for more specific situations. And that brings us to option 2, what we'll call supplemental accidental coverage.
Now, one of the most common ways you do this is with something called a rider. Honestly, the best way to think of a rider is like adding an optional feature to a car. You pay a little extra to get the sunroof or the better sound system. Same idea here. You pay a little more each month and you get an extra benefit, but it only kicks in under very specific conditions. And here's what that looks like in real dollars. So remember that $300,000 20-year plan for about $58? Well, if he decides to add an accidental death rider, they call it an AD rider, his new monthly total jumps to just over $85. What's the point? Well, that rider could potentially double the payout if his death was caused by a covered accident. So it's an extra layer of what-if protection.
But a rider isn't the only game in town. If he's really focused on this type of coverage, there's another route he could take. Buying a totally separate standalone policy that only covers accidental death. So if he goes this standalone route for that same $300,000 coverage, he's got two main flavors to choose from. On one side, you've got a policy with something called return of premium, or ROP. This one's pricier, about $56 a month, and it ends when he's 70. But here's the kicker, if he outlives it, he gets all that money back. On the other side, you've got the no ROP version. It's cheaper, under $40 a month, and it actually lasts longer until he's 80. The catch? No money back at the end. So yeah, that return of premium thing, it's pretty much what it sounds like, a money-back guarantee. You're basically paying more for the policy, but if you don't end up needing it, the insurance company just sends you back all the premiums you paid in. It's a classic trade-off, right? Pay less now or pay more with the chance to get it all back later. Okay, let's totally shift gears for a second and look at a completely different beast. This is option 3, the lifetime plan, which is all about permanent coverage. So we're talking about permanent life insurance now, and the big difference is right in the name. Unlike term, which has that expiration date, this stuff is designed to last your entire life. Plus, it's got this other feature built in, a savings component that builds what's called cash value over time. It's almost like a financial tool people use for bigger, more complex things, like estate planning or even boosting their retirement. It's not just about simple income protection. And here's the thing you'll notice right away, the price tag. For that same $300,000 of coverage, Daniel's looking at over $139 a month. Whoa! So why the big jump? Well, that higher premium is paying for two things, the lifetime coverage and that cash value savings account. And this, right here, is one of the biggest debates in personal finance. Should you get an all-in-one product like this, or should you buy term and invest the difference? For Daniel, that would mean getting the cheaper $58 term policy and then taking that $80 difference and investing it himself every month. All right, so we've looked at the simple term plan, we've looked at adding extra layers for accidents, and we've looked at the big all-in-one permanent plan. Now it's time for the final recommendation. Let's put all the pieces together and figure out what actually makes sense for Daniel.
So let's go all the way back to the beginning. What was Daniel's goal? Remember, he's 31, he's got 2 young kids, and all he wants is a simple, no-fuss way to protect his family's income. So after looking at all this stuff, which one is the best fit for him right here, right now? And you know what? The answer is crystal clear. It's the $300,000 20-year term life policy. Yep, not the fancy permanent plan, not the separate accident policy. It's that core foundational plan we looked at right at the start.
So why that one? Well, it just checks all the boxes for him. It absolutely hits the sweet spot. For starters, 300 grand is a serious safety net for his family. 2, at less than $60 a month, it's actually affordable for a young family. 3, and this is huge, it locks in his rate now while he's 31 and healthy. And finally, that 20-year term, it's the perfect length. It covers the exact window when his kids will be growing up and depending on him the most. You know, Daniel's story is a perfect example of how the best life insurance isn't always the most complicated or expensive one. It's just about finding the right tool for the job you need done. His job was simple: protect his family for the next 20 years. And he found a plan that does just that, and nothing more. Which really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Daniel found his plan. So what does your safety net look like?